Welcome to an unforgettable story that begins with a seemingly routine traffic stop but quickly escalates into a dramatic confrontation with far-reaching consequences. Officer Sarah Collins and her partner Mike Harris are patrolling the city streets when Mike's blatant racism leads them to pull over a well-dressed black woman. As Mike's prejudiced behavior unfolds, tensions rise, and Sarah finds herself caught between her duty and her conscience. What starts as a routine check turns into a shocking encounter with a surprising twist that no one saw coming. Watch as Sarah makes a courageous stand that exposes corruption and sparks a pivotal moment of change. From tense beginnings to a dramatic climax, this story will leave you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and give us a thumbs up to stay tuned for our latest stories. It's completely free and your support helps our community of story lovers grow. Join us and be a part of the community. Officer Sarah Collins and her partner, Mike Harris, patrolled the city streets in their cruiser. The air was thick with tension as Mike vented his frustrations about recent changes in the police department's hierarchy. Can you believe they promoted one of them to captain? Mike's voice dripped with contempt, his grip on the steering wheel tight enough to turn his knuckles white. This department's on a downward spiral. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Though she had only been on the force for a few months, Mike's overt racism and harsh criticisms unsettled her. Maybe we should give the new captain a fair chance, she suggested, trying to inject a note of reason into the conversation. Mike's response was immediate and dismissive. "You're just being naive," he scoffed. "They're all the same. You can't trust any of them." As they turned onto Main Street, Mike's attention was suddenly caught by a sleek black sedan gliding smoothly through traffic. The driver, a poised and impeccably dressed black woman, adhered to every traffic regulation, but something about her presence set Mike on edge. "Look at that car," Mike muttered, his voice laced with suspicion. "I bet she stole it." Sarah frowned, her instincts telling her that the woman's only crime was her choice of vehicle and appearance. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice firm despite her unease, "we don't have any reason to suspect she's done anything wrong. She's following the rules." Mike's disapproving grunt was the only reply as he flicked on the cruiser's lights and pulled the sedan over. The situation was about to escalate in ways that neither officer could have anticipated. "That's what you think," Mike replied with a hint of malice as he activated the patrol car's lights. The black sedan complied smoothly, pulling over to the curb. Sarah watched as the driver's shoulders tensed, her unease growing with every passing second. Mike, oblivious to her concerns, exited the patrol car with a smirk that suggested he was relishing the moment. Sarah followed reluctantly, her stomach knotting with anxiety. As they approached the sedan, the driver's window rolled down, revealing a composed yet wary woman. Her eyes flicked between Mike and Sarah, a mixture of apprehension and dignity in her gaze. "Is there a problem, officers?" she inquired with a calm that seemed at odds with the situation. "License and registration," Mike ordered curtly, his voice tinged with barely concealed contempt. The woman, her hands trembling slightly, handed over her documents with quiet resignation. Sarah noticed the subtle tremor in her hands, a sign of the stress she was under. "Lauren Brooks," Mike read aloud, his voice carrying an edge of disdain. He then leveled a piercing look at her. "And what brings you to this part of town, Miss Brooks?" "I'm heading to a meeting," Lauren answered with a measured tone. "Could you tell me why I've been pulled over?" Sarah's heart sank as she saw Mike's demeanor shift from professional to confrontational. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it was about to take a turn for the worse. Mike's eyes narrowed into slits as he fixed his gaze on Lauren. "We ask the questions here. Step out of the vehicle," he commanded with a steely edge to his voice. Lauren's hesitation was palpable as she flicked a worried glance at Sarah, who could barely meet her eyes, her face etched with a mixture of guilt and shame. After a moment of hesitation, Lauren complied, opening the car door with deliberate slowness that seemed to echo the mounting tension. Sarah's heart raced, her apprehension growing with each passing second. She felt a profound sense of wrongness about the situation but found herself paralyzed, unsure of how to intervene or change the course of events. Mike, taking on an air of authority that bordered on menacing, began his questioning with a tone that left little room for cooperation. His demeanor was anything but friendly as he circled Lauren's car with the predatory precision of a hawk. His gaze was sharp, every movement calculated as he scrutinized the vehicle for any sign that could justify escalating the situation. "Nice ride you've got here, Mrs. Brooks," Mike sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Care to explain how someone like you manages to afford a vehicle like this?" Lauren took a deep breath, her composure a stark contrast to Mike's aggressive demeanor. "I work hard for my money, officer," she responded, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I'm on my way to an important meeting. Could you please tell me the reason for this stop?" Mike, however, chose to ignore her question, his hand resting ominously on the grip of his holster. "Mind if we take a look inside?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lauren stood her ground, her resolve unwavering. "I do mind, actually," she said firmly, her voice imbued with quiet strength. "I haven't done anything wrong, and I do not consent to a search." Mike's expression darkened, his face contorting with visible frustration. It was clear that he wasn't accustomed to being challenged, and his anger was palpable as he prepared to escalate the situation further. Little did they know this seemingly routine traffic stop was on the brink of turning their lives upside down in ways they could not yet imagine. "Oh, I see, you've got something to hide, don't you?" Without any prior warning, he yanked the car door open with a harsh screech and started rifling through the interior of the vehicle. Lauren took a step forward, ready to intervene and protest the unwarranted search. However, Sarah quickly positioned herself between them, a look of alarm on her face. "Sir, please, you need to step back," Sarah added, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and urgency. As Mike continued his search with an air of authority, he covertly retrieved a small bag of white powder from his pocket and carefully slid it under the driver's seat. Sarah caught the movement out of the corner of her eye, her pulse quickening as she processed the gravity of what was unfolding before her. This wasn't merely an instance of racial profiling. This was an orchestrated setup. If you're still here and enjoying the story, drop yes in the comments below to let me know you're with me till the end. Your support means a lot, and I truly appreciate your valuable time. With a triumphant flourish, Mike emerged from the car, brandishing the bag of powder. "Well, well, well," he declared, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Look what we have here." Lauren's eyes widened in shock and disbelief, her face draining of color. "That's not mine. You just planted that," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of desperation and anger. Mike's lips curled into a smug grin. "Looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer," he said with a tone of finality. "You're under arrest." As he reached for his handcuffs, Lauren's composed exterior finally shattered. "This is outrageous. I'm telling you, that's not mine," she protested vehemently. Sarah's stomach churned with revulsion. She was witnessing an egregious abuse of power, a deliberate act of corruption. Her father's words echoed in her mind with haunting clarity. A true officer of the law is meant to protect and serve everyone equally, not just those who fit a certain profile. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, crackling with a sense of impending crisis. Lauren, her face etched with fear and desperation, turned to Sarah, her eyes pleading for intervention. "Officer, you saw what happened. You need to tell him this isn't right," she implored, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and dread. Mike, his face hardened into a scowl, whirled around, his eyes locked onto Sarah with a mix of irritation and menace. "Don't you dare listen to her, rookie," he snapped, his tone dripping with authority. "This is how we clean up the streets, by any means necessary." His words hung heavy in the air, a grim declaration of his unyielding stance. Sarah stood motionless, caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Her mind raced as she grappled with the gravity of the moment, torn between her duty to support her partner and her moral obligation to uphold the principles of justice. The weight of the decision bore down on her shoulders, pressing her to choose between conformity and conscience, a choice that could irrevocably alter the trajectory of her career and possibly her entire life. As Mike advanced with the intent to handcuff Lauren, the situation became increasingly volatile, poised on the brink of eruption. The seconds stretched interminably, each tick of the clock amplifying the stakes. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched Mike's hand inch toward his handcuffs, a sight that seemed to slow time itself. Memories surged through her mind like a tidal wave, her father's proud, approving smile on the day she graduated from the police academy, the countless tales of integrity and honor she had absorbed throughout her upbringing, and the solemn oath she had taken to protect and serve with unwavering fidelity. In that pivotal moment, the future hung in the balance, and Sarah's decision would not only determine the fate of an innocent woman but also test the very essence of her commitment to the ideals she had sworn to uphold. "Stop!" Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a knife, its unexpected sharpness startling even herself. Mike froze mid-motion, his hand hovering just inches from Lauren's wrist, his expression a mix of surprise and simmering anger. "What did you just say, rookie?" Mike's voice was laced with incredulity, struggling to mask his rising fury. "I said stop, officer. This isn't right, and deep down you know it," Sarah insisted, her tone unwavering as she stood her ground. Mike's face twisted into a grimace of rage, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You listen to me, you little punk," Mike growled, his voice seething with years of authority. "I've been on this force longer than you've been breathing. You don't get to lecture me on what's right or wrong." "Maybe that's true," Sarah replied firmly, her stance resolute despite the pressure. "But I know what I saw. You planted that evidence. This woman is innocent." Lauren, who had been tense and silent throughout the encounter, now held a flicker of hope in her eyes, her gaze fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Mike's voice dropped to a threatening rumble, his demeanor darkening. "You're making a colossal mistake, kid," he warned, his menace palpable. "I can end your career right here, right now. Is that really what you want?" For a moment, a seed of doubt took root in Sarah's mind. Ever since she was a child, she had dreamed of becoming a police officer, envisioning herself as a beacon of justice and a force for positive change. She had dedicated countless hours to her training, endured rigorous tests, and faced numerous challenges, all with the hope of making a real difference. Now, faced with a critical decision, she wondered if she was truly prepared to risk all that she had worked so hard to build. Could she throw away her career for the sake of one person? As her thoughts swirled with uncertainty, Sarah glanced at Lauren. The woman's eyes were wide with fear and desperation, a reflection of the gravity of the situation and her vulnerability. At that moment, Sarah's doubts were overshadowed by a profound sense of duty. She knew she could not abandon Lauren in her time of need. "If standing up for what's right means losing my job, then so be it," Sarah said firmly, her voice steady and unyielding. "I refuse to be part of this charade and let injustice prevail." Mike's face turned a deep shade of red, his anger barely contained as he thrust his finger into Sarah's chest. "You're done, you hear me? Done. I will make sure you never wear a badge again. You can count on that." Sarah stood her ground, her expression resolute. "Go ahead, Mike. Do what you have to do, but I'm not moving from this spot, and you are not arresting this woman on false charges." The air between the two officers crackled with intense hostility. Mike's rage was palpable, and the tension seemed almost tangible. Lauren, realizing the precariousness of the situation, seized the opportunity to intervene. "Officers, please," Lauren interjected, her voice trembling but determined. "There's no need for this to escalate further. We can resolve this situation peacefully and with respect for everyone involved." Mike whirled on Lauren with a scowl, his irritation boiling over. "Shut your mouth. You don't have any say in this matter." Sarah, finding a surge of courage and resolve, stepped closer to Mike. She placed a hand firmly on his shoulder, trying to physically and metaphorically pull him back from the brink. "That's enough," she said with authority. "She has rights, and you're in clear violation of them." Mike reacted with hostility, shoving Sarah's hand away with a rough push. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, kid. Don't think for a second that I won't report this blatant act of insubordination." His voice was laced with menace, a clear threat that underscored the seriousness of the situation. Sarah stood her ground, her father's words resonating powerfully in her mind. "I'd rather lose my job than lose my integrity," she declared, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The tension in the air was palpable as the confrontation escalated. Neither Mike nor Sarah realized that this moment was more than just a heated exchange. It was about to become a turning point with repercussions far beyond this isolated traffic stop. Sarah's unwavering stance against injustice was poised to ignite a series of events that would challenge the very core of their police department and ripple through their community. Onlookers in passing cars slowed down, their curiosity piqued as they watched the drama unfold on the roadside. Lauren, facing the critical juncture with no apparent exit, chose to take a bold gamble. "Officer," she said, her voice steady and authoritative, "I think there's something crucial you both need to know." Mike's response was a sneer, his arrogance barely masked. "Save it for the judge, pal." Lauren, undeterred, continued with a commanding presence. "I am Captain Lauren Brooks, the new head of your precinct." Her declaration hung in the air, its weight undeniable. The impact was immediate. Mike's confident demeanor evaporated as his face went pale, while Sarah's eyes widened in astonishment. "That's impossible," Mike stammered, his previously unshakable bravado now crumbling in the face of the unexpected revelation. Lauren moved deliberately, her hand sliding slowly into her jacket pocket. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and the officer's eyes followed her every movement with a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. For a fleeting, breathless moment, it seemed as though she might produce something far more alarming. The silence was nearly unbearable as the tension reached its peak. But as Lauren drew her hand out, it was not a weapon, but her badge and identification that emerged. She held them up with a calm and resolute demeanor, her expression a mask of quiet authority. "I was on my way to headquarters for an important meeting with the commissioner when you chose to pull me over," she stated, her voice laced with a quiet authority that masked her deep-seated disappointment and simmering frustration. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she took the badge and ID, her gaze locked onto the identification as if trying to process the enormity of what it represented. She passed the documents to Mike, whose face drained of color as he grasped the reality of his actions. His hands shook uncontrollably, and his eyes widened with a mix of fear and regret. The gravity of his mistake was sinking in, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. I didn't know," Mike said, his voice faltering as the realization of his blunder struck him with brutal clarity. Lauren's eyes, though filled with steely resolve, softened just enough to convey the deep sense of betrayal she felt. "Would it have changed anything if you had known? Should it? Every person, irrespective of their rank or skin color, deserves to be treated with fundamental respect and dignity," she said, her voice laced with a profound sense of disillusionment. The words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the principles that should have guided their actions. Desperation clung to Mike as he struggled to find a way out of the escalating crisis. "Captain, please, I can explain. We've been receiving countless reports about drug trafficking in this area." Lauren's interruption was swift and final, her tone cutting through the excuses like a knife. "Save your justifications. I saw you deliberately plant those drugs in my car, officer. And Officer Collins here was a witness to the entire incident, wasn't she?" Her voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of raw anger and disappointment, revealing the depth of her dismay at the betrayal of those who were sworn to uphold the law. Sarah's face revealed a complex mixture of relief and steely resolve as she met Lauren's gaze. "Yes, Captain, I did," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. There was a deep sense of liberation in her admission, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders, but also a resolve to stand firmly on the side of justice. Mike's face darkened with a storm of rage as he turned his fury on Sarah. The betrayal he felt was palpable, and his voice dripped with venom. "You little rat," he spat, his eyes seething with betrayal. "After everything I've taught you, after all the years I've invested in mentoring you, you're going to side with her?" Sarah remained resolute, her gaze unflinching. Her voice was steady and resolute as she responded, "I'm siding with the truth." The words were a declaration of her moral stance, a stand against the corruption she had witnessed. Lauren stepped in between them, her presence a calm but unyielding barrier to Mike's outburst. "That's enough, Officer Mike." Lauren's voice was like steel, cutting through the chaos with a clarity that brooked no argument. "Your actions today have not only breached department policy but have also violated the law. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty. Hand over your badge and gun." The impact of Lauren's words hit Mike with the force of a sledgehammer. His face contorted with a primal mixture of rage and disbelief, his entire body trembling with the intensity of his emotions. "You can't do this to me," he bellowed, his voice cracking under the weight of his fury and desperation. "I've dedicated 2 decades of my life to this force. I've sacrificed so much, and this is how you repay me." His plea was a raw, anguished cry, a desperate attempt to cling to the remnants of his career and identity, only to be met with the stark finality of Lauren's decision. Lauren's voice was soft but laden with gravity as she addressed Mike, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "And in those 20 years, she asked quietly, "how many innocent lives have you ruined? How many people have suffered because of your prejudice?" Each question seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime, pressing down on Mike with a crushing force. His defiant stance faltered, and his shoulders slumped as the full impact of his actions began to seep into his consciousness. The realization of his moral failings and the suffering he had inflicted weighed heavily on him, leaving him exposed and broken. As Lauren turned to call for backup over the radio, a small crowd had begun to gather nearby. The scene was electric with the buzz of onlookers, many with phones out, capturing every moment. The spectacle of a corrupt officer being exposed by the very person he had attempted to frame was quickly becoming the focal point of a viral sensation. The gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone. The unfolding drama was set to ripple far beyond the immediate scene. Sarah, still reeling from the whirlwind of events, looked up at Lauren with a mixture of remorse and gratitude. "Captain, I'm so sorry for not speaking up sooner," she said, her voice tinged with regret and self-reproach. Lauren turned to her, her expression softening as she placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You did the right thing when it counted, Officer Collins," she said, her tone warm with understanding. "That's what matters. Sometimes, it takes a moment of courage to make a difference, and you showed that courage when it was most needed." Her words were both a balm for Sarah's guilt and an affirmation of the integrity that had ultimately triumphed in a moment of deep crisis. As they stood together, waiting for backup to arrive, both women were acutely aware that this moment marked the beginning of something far larger than the immediate confrontation. The unmasking of Captain Brooks had ignited a spark that would set the stage for a far-reaching and inevitable reckoning, one that would compel their department, and indeed their entire city, to confront and address the deep-seated issues of racism and corruption that had long festered beneath the surface. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, the wail of the emergency vehicles echoing through the streets and heralding the arrival of reinforcements. For Sarah and Lauren, this was no longer merely about a single traffic stop gone awry. It had evolved into a critical flashpoint for the community's long-simmering grievances and frustrations. This moment was poised to become a defining event, a powerful catalyst that would reshape the relationship between the police and the very people they were sworn to protect and serve. As the sirens drew closer, the gravity of the situation settled over them both. The eyes of the city were upon them, and the larger world was on the verge of taking notice. The stakes had never been higher. This was not just a confrontation, but a pivotal juncture that would demand accountability, provoke necessary changes, and hopefully pave the way for a more just and equitable future. In the face of this monumental challenge, Sarah and Lauren stood united, their resolve fortified by the knowledge that their actions in this crucial moment could have profound and lasting implications. What an intense and eye-opening journey we've witnessed today. From a routine traffic stop to a dramatic confrontation, this story has shown us the profound impact of standing up for what's right and the courage it takes to challenge injustice. We've seen how a single moment of integrity can ignite change and hold those in power accountable. Now, we want to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? How will you apply this lesson in your own life? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Your perspective might inspire others to take action as well. Thank you for watching African Tales Tube. If you've liked this video, please leave your comment below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. It's completely free and your support helps our community of story lovers grow. Join us and be a part of the community. Until next time, stay blessed.